After Show with TelecomTV's Guy Daniels and Ray Maistre.
Yes, welcome to the After Show on TelecomTV. I'm Guy Daniels, Director of Content, and we are broadcasting live at the end of day one of the TelecomTV Summit on the Green Network. Now, we've got a great lineup of guests joining us today, and of course, we want to hear from you. We're here to help if we can, and we'll attempt to answer as many of your questions as possible. So if you haven't yet got in touch, then do so now, and the sooner the better. Please don't leave it until the end of the show. That's too late. Now, there's a form on the website below this video that you can use, and there's also a poll question. It's nice and simple, so go ahead and cast your vote now. As always, your co-host for the After Show is Ray Maistre, who is Editorial Director here at TelecomTV. Ray, earlier today we ran two roundtables, one to define what we actually mean by the Green Network, and the other to consider how we go about measuring the energy efficiency, both critical first steps.
Yeah, thanks, Guy. A great start to the summit. And it's already noticeable just in the first few weeks of 2022 that this is an increasingly important area of focus for all companies in the communications networking ecosystem. This isn't just a box ticking exercise. These are meaningful, impactful developments. And I can't wait to see what questions we're going to get from today's audience and how the results of our poll will turn out.
Yes, absolutely. Please vote in the poll because we want to know what you think. So go ahead and do it now. So on with the show, and joining us live on the program today are Anita Dola, who is Chief Executive Officer of the NGMN, Mary-Paul Odini, Distinguished Technologist with the Communications Technology Group at HPE, and also Chair of the Next Year Alliance Green G Working Group. Lauren Ng, who is Managing Director, UK and Ireland Sustainability Services Lead at Accenture. Niall Robinson, Head of OpenSync Partnerships at Plume. And Ana Maria Galindo Serrano, who is Telecoms Engineer at Orange Labs Networks and the NGMN Project Co-Lead for its Green Future Networks. Hello everyone, very good to see you all again. Thanks for returning for the Q&A because we've got lots of audience questions to get through. Ray, have you got our first one?
Yes, I do. Thanks, Guy. Anita, this one is for you and it's very timely because we know at TelecomTV that the NGMN has today announced its Global Green Networks benchmark, and we've written about that on TelecomTV today. What makes this different from current mobile network benchmarks?
Yeah, thank you, Ray. Great question. So we are going to develop the industry standard for green networks, for a global green networks benchmark. And what makes it different to other benchmarks which are already available in the industry? The current benchmarks are typically concentrated and focused on measuring quality of service and user experience benchmarks. And what we want to do is different by focusing on the green networks benchmark to reward network operators for operating green networks, and it needs to have a real end-to-end view. So it will need to consider the life cycle assessment. It also needs to consider external services, so maybe also up to scope 3 analysis. We are going to establish globally applicable KPIs and methodologies. We will define a global evaluation methodology, and we will define the data sources for the assessment and also how such data can be obtained to make the benchmark really impactful and meaningful. It also needs to consider, even though it's a difference to measuring the quality of service and user experience by focusing on the green networks benchmark, that it will need to consider also parameters which are also quality of service, service volume, the service area, to make it a normalized view on the environmental impact. So it's a real exciting initiative we have started, and we will first focus on high-level KPIs to have a fast progress here, and later we will focus on more detailed assessments.
Okay, and as far as you know, Anita, is there anything else out there in the industry like this already, or is this something, are you filling a vacuum here?
First of all, we strongly believe that we are filling a vacuum because by focusing on technology aspects of a network, there is nothing in the market like this at the moment. Of course, there are already other initiatives, for instance, by the CDP, but which we will also consider. So it's not about to duplicating anything, but our initiative is more focused on really a technical benchmark with regards to green networks.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Anita. Well, that question obviously was quite specific to the NGMN based on the news announced today. So I think at this point, Guy, we can probably move on to the next question from our audience.
Yeah, thanks, Ray. And as you mentioned earlier, we are getting the questions coming in. I'm just looking across at my screen now, and we are getting them already from the start of the show. We've got a couple more questions coming in. So without further ado, the next viewer question we've got in, Lauren, I'm going to put this one towards you first, if I may. The question is, green networks won't achieve much by themselves unless they are integrated in a circular economy. What are your thoughts about potential future green networks where equipment is designed for total recycling and only leased to network operators for their operational life cycle?
Super, thank you. I think ultimately the circular economy is where we'd like to get to. So really moving from that linear economy that we talk about now in terms of take, make, waste, and really towards a more circular economy where we look at leasing models, like you mentioned, subscription models for other types of resources or business models, and really builds on actually the kind of benchmarking that we just discussed in terms of life cycle assessment. So what is that end-to-end life cycle look like for networks, and where can we improve it? And I think actually from a network perspective, there's a huge opportunity there, really for the operator themselves, whether that's from looking at old or underused or underutilized equipment and actually getting money back from that. So for resale, so copper is one of those resources actually that we know that has a huge resale value as a metal, but also actually looking further down the track. So both how do we extend the longevity of the current networks that we have? So really ensuring that we're lasting as long as possible, kind of as efficiently as possible. And then looking at potential business models that might be leasing or might be others, depending on the market, depending on the player, but what makes most financial sense. And so I think overall, the circular economy presents a really interesting and innovative topic for network operators overall and telcos in that sector, given the extent of the e-waste challenges that we're facing. And I think it's an opportunity also to be a bit more ambitious, going beyond just energy demand, energy efficiency and supply from a green network perspective, and give the opportunity to network operators to really think outside and lead the way in terms of that circular economy vision. So I think ultimately it's a hugely exciting opportunity. Thanks
very much, Lauren. That's a great question there. We're hearing a lot more about the circular economy, and I think perhaps it started in our industry with smartphones, but it's extending all the time. Anna Marie, you'd like to come in with some comments about this one?
Yeah, thank you. So, of course, I completely agree with Lauren, but I wanted to add that for us, operator is very important and a very huge opportunity because we need to reduce our scope 3 and using circular economy is one of the ways that we need to use. We have been working during the last years to reduce energy consumption and to increase the energy efficiency, but circular economy is the next big step where we continue to work. We have been working during the last years to reduce or to increase the circular economy for handsets, and I think we need to continue this in this sense for especially network equipments where footprint is important too.
Yeah, nice you said. Let's hope we can do that. Any more comments about the circular economy and recycling and leasing back? Otherwise, as I said, we have got a lot of questions in. So why don't we, Ray? Let's head over back to you and pick up our next viewer question then.
Okay, thanks, Guy. Right, our next viewer question. I'm going to put this one to Marie-Paul. What would be the potential positive and negative impacts of a proliferation of 5G edge points and private networks in the green network context? So what kind of gains and what kind of challenges does the extension of a distributed 5G network bring?
Yeah, that's a very important one. As we've seen, the telecom industry is really engaging and acting towards more sustainability. There's been lots of activities. I mean, we see also with the NGMN, with the NextG Alliance, and so operators are on board. We hear Orange as well. There is a kind of risk, that with the private networks, enterprise, have to learn, how to be more sustainable and so on. On the other side, there's lots of Fortune 100 and lots of enterprise that already have also engaged. And for sure, the vendors are very much supportive, of more sustainable equipment and so on. So on that side, I would say, I'm pretty optimistic. The advantage, though, could be quite interesting if we look at the full picture. So as we've explained in our Green G white paper that was just published, a few days ago, we need to look at energy, so CO2 emissions and overall GHG and so on. But we also need to look into water consumption. We need to look into land and space, and air pollution, and all these other aspects. And so if we look into all these different elements, if we look into the energy, for instance, there is a great opportunity to move, a bit away from the model of having, these huge data centers, which if we look into their locations, like for instance, in the US, lots of them are in the southwestern part of the US and California, which have very severe drought and water stress these days. And so there could be, a benefit of having more distributed edge locations, which would benefit from having, local water, local energy generation potentially. There's also, lots of loss as well of electricity, energy transportation, up to like 5%. So having the edge locations closer to more distributed grid could bring lots of benefits. And then, of course, the space that is being used. And today, the data centers, the huge data centers, they use a stack of pizza box, and they're not necessarily optimized in terms of space, as we can provide to customers with dedicated hardware for the edge, like the edge line that we have, which is really optimized towards the swap, the space and power. And so this can really also improve the space being used and protect the land. So globally be more sustainable.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, so many things to consider here, but they're all important. So all need to be taken into consideration. Okay, if there aren't any additional comments on the impact of a distributed 5G network, Guy, I will hand back to you at this point for the next question.
Yeah, thank you, Ray. And a reminder to our viewers, please keep the questions coming. We're here for you and we'll answer as many as we possibly can. So here's the next one that Ray and I have selected. Niall, let me put this to you first. Is there a broad recommended roadmap for telcos to become energy efficient and net zero?
Wow, that's a very broad question. So I don't know if I can speak to a generic roadmap. I think We've already heard from some of the other panelists here, some of the focus points for operators to become, extremely green, let's say, and sort of net neutral in terms of their use of resources. I think as I look at, large initiatives that are going on that have a big impact, the move to, towards cloud computing, to using AI, is a very interesting one, and we've seen it appear in multiple parts of the network. You see it in the edges of the access network, where you've got software-defined networking using network functions virtualization to have kind of a generic device, at the edge of the network, with services delivered to that device, from a cloud. So you don't have to have, a separate firewall box and a separate hardware accelerator device, et cetera, et cetera. You can have all of that in one piece of hardware, with the services, being run remotely on that device. Certainly reduces the amount of hardware, amount of devices that you have to have across your network. We've looked at that, and we're using that approach actually in what goes inside the consumer home, right, with the ultimate edge of the network. There we use cloud computing to control that device, to control the services that the user experiences on that box, and it leads to something perhaps along the lines of that circular economy, to extending the lifetime of the device that's in that consumer home. That's what's out there in the tens of millions. And if you're going to try to impact consumption and waste, you really want to attack the devices that are out there with the largest volumes. So if you can extend the lifetime, we call it upcycling of that device. Keep it out there instead of having to be returned and recycled after 3, 4, 5 years. If you can keep it out there for maybe 7 to 10 years, you can have a dramatic impact on the consumption that the operators are experiencing, to keep their customers happy. I think you also see, again, by pushing the compute to a centralized location, instead of having tens of millions of mini computers out there, all consuming power, in a pretty inefficient device. The smaller the device, usually the fans inside and everything else are pretty inefficient in terms of energy consumption. If you can push that compute to a different part of the network, to the cloud, to these data centers that are becoming greener and greener, then I think you're also seeing a dramatic impact in terms of the energy consumption, just for delivering those services as well. So I think, if you can drive that technology roadmap towards green networks, I think that's a huge impact for the operators.
Yeah, thanks, Niall. And as you say, a small difference across a multitude of devices has an overall big impact. Lauren, let me come across to you for comments on this question.
Super. Thank you. I think completely agree with what's just been said, particularly kind of the potential and the power of understanding your existing footprint. So knowing the size of those individual devices, the numbers of those, and the impact that has on a carbon footprint, and then really driving that down. I think there are other opportunities, like the circular economy that we talked to. Renewable energy sourcing and electricity is one of the often the easiest, and actually in terms of price comparison can often be cheaper than traditional energy sourcing as well. So looking at opportunities there. And I think the potential for actually network providers to really think about how they can help other industries and other areas to reduce their own emissions, and really drive towards net zero that way can also be a hugely interesting topic. So really not just kind of within the network's own scope of driving towards net zero around those efficiency options, around those renewable options, and driving that down to zero, but then going even further and actually looking at how can we enable things like smart transport, smart manufacturing through digital twins, for example, and providing the network infrastructure below those to really continue to decrease emissions beyond just our own organization and our own network, but really start thinking about the wider ecosystem play as well has a huge opportunity.
Good points. Thanks very much, Lauren, for those. I'm going to come to Anita in a moment, but Anna Maria, let me come to you first for additional comments.
Thank you. I just wanted to go back to the question and talk a bit about the roadmap for Netzero. So just to recall that GSMA recommended operators to become Netzero by 2050. So I will say that every day before 2050 will be great, and the sooner the better. And I also wanted to mention the strategies that typically operators are using to achieve this net zero. So the first steps is to go as far as possible on the energy efficiency of your networks. Then, as was mentioned by Niels and Lauren, is to work with the ecosystem to reduce scopes 1, 2, and 3 emissions as much as possible. This is the big work. Then the use of renewable energy to decarbonize as much as possible the energy consumed, and also to work with your providers for them to do the same for their scopes 1 and 2, and so on and so forth, of course. And last but not least is that there will be always remaining emissions that cannot be avoided or removed. And therefore, the plan is to use carbon sinks. And here it's very important to use sustainable and responsible carbon sink solutions. There are companies working a lot on that, having very accurate follow-up on the carbon that can be removed from the atmosphere thanks to these carbon sinks. And so here, as for the renewable projects, we need to have and to choose in a very smart way and to look for the most sustainable solutions and the more great solutions to be able to measure all this in the full chain of the company.
Great, that's very good to hear. And let's not wait till 2030 either. Let's try and bring this forward if we can as an industry. Anita, let me cut across to you for comments.
Yeah, I mean, a lot has been already said, and I don't want to repeat what the very good speakers we have in the panel already said. But maybe also back to the reduction of energy consumption. It also helps, so by defining the roadmap, it also helps to understand which areas of the network are actually consuming the most energy. We know it's the radio access network, but there will be also other methodologies applied to understand what are the most consuming parts, also the core network. We already talked about cloudification, virtualization opportunities. Circular economy is a big topic. And last but not least, to also support the understanding of the areas, to the environmental footprint coming from different services. This is something we also addressed. It's to find a methodology for the calculation of the end-to-end service footprints. And this is also quite complex because it is including scope 3 as well. So I think that's what I can add to what was said already.
Great, thanks, Anita, and thanks everyone for the comments there. Lots of great comments for that particular question. Well, let's move on in that case, and Ray, I'll hand over to you for our next question.
Okay, thanks, Guy. Right, our next viewer question goes to Anna Maria, and the question is, what are the main levers to minimize carbon emissions? What are the main things that can be done in this industry to minimize carbon emissions?
Yeah, so I think we have talked a bit about this. So, of course, carbon emissions of operators keep completely related to the electricity consumed. For at least for scopes 1 or 2. So we need to keep working on improving the energy efficiency of the networks and also to use as much as possible renewable energy sources. This is as for the emissions, right? So that I will say that these are the 2 levers that are the most important part. And then for scope 3, that's a bit more complex as this will depend on our vendors and providers, and therefore to reduce our emissions in the scope 3, we need to first work with vendors and try to advance together in this reduction of scope 3 through circular economy methods, through reduction of scopes 1 and 2 for the vendors emissions, this kind of stuff. And then another action that we are currently taking is to include circularity aspects or questions in our RFPs. We hope this will have important impact on the reduction of scope 3 and therefore the related emissions. And of course, from in a more internal company strategies to continue our projects and our campaigns to reduce the emissions related to handsets and CPEs. So here the most important thing to do is to try our clients to keep their handsets and CPEs as longer as possible and to bring them back for recycling and this kind of approaches. So
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Anna Maria. And lots of different things that different parts of the ecosystem can be doing to contribute to that. Okay, if there isn't any further responses to that question, Guy, I'm going to hand back over to you for the next part of the program.
Yeah, thanks, Ray. I think, Mary-Paul, I think you just wanted to come in just at the end of that one and just have a response.
I beg your pardon.
Please,
sorry,
go ahead.
Mary-Paul.
I was just thinking that maybe we could highlight the fact that, to save a bit of energy, there are some enhancements that can be provided with the data centers, for instance, by playing with the cooling. We know that, of course, the RAN is consuming lots of energy, but also the cooling of the data center is consuming lots of energy. And there are lots of enhancements to the cooling, playing with the temperature. There's, lots of energy that is being spent in cooling down the temperature of the water through the cooling systems and so on. So there's lots of work that can be done in that space. And of course, we talked about the virtualization, but the even more important is the management of the virtualization, making sure that, we have the proper metrics, and then we have some ways to probably automate more, the systems with artificial intelligence and to get to this zero-touch optimization of the network so that we really optimize the resources, and this way we can also reduce energy consumption.
Yeah, absolutely. Great points there. And as we've seen in the past couple of years, some of these actions are already being taken, especially using AI to shut off parts of the network when they're not being used. And I'm sure we'll only see more of that in the coming years. Okay, so thanks very much. And I think if there aren't any more comments, Guy, back over to you.
Yep, thank you, Ray. Well, it's time now to check in on our audience poll for this year's Green Network Summit. One simple yet fiendishly clever question with 5 multiple choice answers, and I'm afraid you can only pick one. And the question we are asking all this week is, how can telcos most effectively reduce their energy consumption levels? And you can see the very latest up to the second data right in front of you on our lovely new color coordinated graphic. Well, it's not looking good for alternative green energy there at the bottom of the list. Actually, it's even looking worse for the cloud at 3% currently, but all to play for. So if you have yet to vote, then please do so. The more votes, obviously, the better. And we're keeping the polls open, and we'll take a final look at the results in tomorrow's live after show. Over to you, Ray, for our next viewer question.
Thanks, Guy. And the next question, this one is open for anybody on today's panel to come in and answer first. And the question is, do you see the opportunity for flexible service tariffs depending on the energy demand and energy cost? For instance, following the price of energy variability depending on the day and the hour in the day. So is there any way of linking flexible tariffs to the amount of energy being used and demanded on the network? A very interesting idea. Is this something that could be introduced into the industry? Something that, as we get smarter software management packages and rating packages, that something could be possible? Would anybody like to come on this? Is this even an idea that's being discussed in the industry at the moment? Or is this a question that's maybe too? Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Anna Maria.
Okay, so actually, this is a very interesting question, and yeah, we are working on these kind of solutions because we have a lot of backup equipment. Like all the sites are equipped with batteries, and we have, as said Marie-Paul, we are trying to implement as much as possible a smart algorithms behind our equipments at technical level, so where we have the batteries. And the idea is to use this backup capacity to erase the consumption of our networks, whether when is where there are peak consumptions, peak of consumptions, and therefore we can avoid the use of the launch of other sources in the grid. For example, in France, we have nuclear energy, which is constant, and therefore when there are peaks, we will be activating generators that can be highly polluting, so we can avoid this extra pollution thanks to erasing our networks. And then on the other side, this is kind of business models, because when we engage to erase our consumption, we can have some we can gain or reduce our billing. So that's a very interesting, and this is something that we are planning to apply soon, and that we have been doing research for a bit of time now. I hope this answered the question.
Okay, well, no, it's great to hear that Orange is looking at this, and obviously this is the kind of capability that's only possible when communication service providers become digital service providers. Really not anything that could be done by manual tasks at all. So great to hear. Thank you for answering that question. Guy, over to you then for the next question from our audience.
Okay, thank you, Ray. Next question. This is a fascinating one. We touched on this in one of our earlier panels. How does operating in a multi-radio access technology environment impact the ability of CSPs to hit their sustainability goals, especially as LTE uses non-efficient, always-on reference signals? So this really gets at the heart of the matter by looking at older, more legacy gear that is so energy hungry in passive modes when it's not really doing very much at all. Any one of our panelists want to look at what operators can do and how having to operate in these multi-RAT environments adversely impacts their sustainability agendas? Any takers for that one? Ooh, this could be the question that stumps our panel. Oh, look at this. To the rescue again. But Lauren, I'll come to you first, and then Anna Maria, come to you second. But Lauren, let's come to you first.
Super. Well, maybe I'll just, if I don't need to be the rescuer, I'll just skim over the easy bits. But I think ultimately, yes, it's difficult. And the number of different technologies and the multiplicity of different technologies and running multiple networks at the same time is is inevitably going to be less efficient than streamlining that. And as we progress in terms of 5G and beyond, those technologies tend to be more energy efficient in terms of that pull that they're using from the system. So I think where possible, if network providers can look at decommissioning, and then actually going back to the circular economy topic that we looked at, to help reduce that energy demand that they have. And then I would say that the second bit, in terms of when we're looking towards net zero, I think it actually makes the case even stronger for looking at renewables and how do we actually ensure that the energy and the electricity predominantly that we're using is green and is from a renewable source, so that where there are legacy networks or technologies that we're not able to decommission, how can we make sure that they're running at the lowest carbon intensity that we need to? Yes, energy demand is a part of the puzzle, but it's not the only piece of the puzzle when it starts, when we start thinking about carbon emissions and net zero strategies overall.
Great, thanks very much, Lauren, for that. Anna Maria, let's come to you first, and then I'll come over to Niall. But Anna Maria.
Okay, so definitely having multi-RAN technology in the base station is a big problem. And this, in terms of energy consumption, every time that we add a technology in the base station, energy consumption increase, right? Nevertheless, this is something that we are looking for in a very closely way, because we need to optimize and to reduce this impact, right? So we are looking for different switching techniques, switching off and on techniques that will allow us to use carrier shutdown, symbol shutdown, even technology shutdown. For example, when there is very low traffic, we can switch users from 5G to 4G and to switch off 5G. This is kind of the things that we are starting to do, and we are planning to exploit much more. Also, another thing that I wanted to say is that, as said by Lauren, the new technologies are more energy efficient, and we look very closely to the improvements or the energy consumption of the different equipments that we have deployed. And with thanks to RAN renewal, we can reduce the energy consumption of the different technologies in one base station. So I just wanted to add that this is something that we are looking very closely, and where the artificial intelligence solutions can bring important savings, because we will be able to switch on and off and to distribute resource consumption in a more efficient way. And we are waiting to have. We are expecting to have very, nice results using these kind of techniques to solve these problems.
Great. Well, it's good to hear there's solutions being tried and tested here to address this issue. Niall, let me come across to you first.
Yeah, I wanted to add that something that we're looking into is we call it 5G.11, right? So it's the use of or combining Wi-Fi, the unlicensed spectrum, with the licensed spectrum, whether it's 4G or 5G, to really improve the energy efficiency is what it comes down to, of getting that data, to whatever that end client device is. It doesn't always have to be through a mobile network, a radio access network. There are other radios, typically in a home or in a community, that can be used that are actually more efficient. And so that's another area that we're looking at. It has to be managed very carefully, right? You don't want to, again, impact the customer's experience by, maybe moving them either from the wireless spectrum to the Wi-Fi spectrum, to deliver whatever it is they're doing, whether it's a phone call or surfing the web, etc. So that's just another area where we think we can bring in a different part of the spectrum, maybe to improve the energy efficiency of the radio networks.
Thank you very much, Niall. And Marie-Paul, let's get some views from you on this question about operating in a multi-radio access technology environment.
Thank you. I just wanted to bounce quickly on the comment from Anna Maria on the AI help. And use this example that I've been using quite often recently, which is some work that we've been doing to optimize the paging. For instance, typically in LTE and in 5G as well, actually, there's paging, when a device is not in range of the network and is not seen by the network. We need to locate the device and so on. And with AI, we can, trace the most recent location of a device and be much more specific on the paging instead of broadcasting, and so there are techniques to optimize, even if it's multi-rate and so on, that can be used across the different technologies, and AI can help with that, definitely. The other maybe comment I would make is that we've seen in some regions, clearly in France, there's a bit of a pushback, against 5G, new technologies and so on, and the sustainability associated with new devices and so on. But we know in the industry that 5G is more efficient than LTE typically. So we probably need to do more work, to educate the market that we can be more efficient also with the circular economy that we've been talking about, with the recycling of the equipment, and really, invite people to adopt 5G, for a better future, instead of staying on the old technologies.
Great. Thank you very much, Marie-Paule, for those additional comments. Time is pressing, so let me hand right back over to Ray.
Thanks, Guy. And I think this probably is going to be our final question for today. And the question is, why are many of the energy-saving features in the latest communication standards not fully implemented or exploited by network operators? And what could be done to redress this? So there's clearly a perception here from the person asking the question that there's a lot that could be done, but which hasn't been implemented. Okay, great. We'll come to Anna Maria first and then to Anita.
Thank you. Well, I love this question because it doesn't mean that because something is standardized, it is implemented in equipment. So we operators are waiting, and we follow very closely the timeline and the time schedule for implementation of these standardized features, green features in the equipment. So we will love to have them all and to be able to use them as soon as possible. And we are waiting for to have them available in the equipments that we buy.
Okay, great. Yeah, this is the great thing about software updates these days, of course. These things should be coming through quicker. And Anita, let's come to you.
Yeah, to add what Anna Maria said, first of all, it's the availability to launch something, but then also the operation has to function well. Operators don't want to compromise on the service experience here and on the user experience. And I think this is also why it's so important to have also the benchmark for green operations and to find the right balance here. But first of all, of course, it has also to consider operational aspects in deploying such features. But all in all, and I want to echo also what Marie-Paule said, that I think we have maybe some limiting beliefs in the industry that 5G is bad, but 5G actually, as Marie-Paule pointed out very well, is a next step to a more sustainable telecommunications industry. And I think this is something we need to bring more or articulate more clearer to the market, as well as any other efforts to tackle circular economy and eco-design of products.
Okay, great. Thank you, Anita. And Anna Maria, I see you wanted to come back in and add another comment there.
Yeah, thank you, Anita. Actually, you remind me of something very important for this too. It's true that when we have evaluation of the quality of service of the networks, the KPIs that external companies are using are peak rate, for example, which is something that only measure the maximum throughput that the mobile can get. And therefore, it's true that we cannot fully exploit the sleep modes that are already available. And this is a fact. So if we, as operator, we want to keep the first place as the best operator in a country, it means that basically we shouldn't be using or we cannot use as much as possible the sleep modes that are available and that we could exploit. So Anita, we need to work this on the benchmark, but also maybe in the regulations. And here we need regulators or governmental institutions to help us to change these metrics and to choose more intelligent ones that will consider and take into account the energy consumption, the energy efficiency, and therefore the use of these green metrics, these green features. Sorry.
Yeah, no, great, great responses there, and great insights. Of course, it's these things aren't always as easy as they look from the outside, and lots of different factors at play here. Okay, if there aren't any more comments or answers to this question, then Guy, I think it's time to hand back to you.
Yeah, thank you, Ray, because we are indeed out of time. It is the end of our after show for today. So thank you so much to all of our guests who joined us for this live program, and also our audience for sending in those questions. Now, we'll be back tomorrow with another live after show program, and of course, more coverage of the Green Network.
That's right. Tomorrow we have roundtable sessions focused on sustainable challenges and initiatives in mobile networks. And how green is the cloud? A great question.
Fantastic question, and no cheeky answers either. Remember to send in your questions, real questions for the after show as soon as you can. Don't leave it too late, because we've got another great lineup of guests who will be joining us tomorrow. So join us then. For now though, thanks for watching and goodbye.
The after show was recorded in front of a live online audience.